I just want to take a moment, if you will. We're going to be in Matthew's Gospel, chapter 14. Matthew chapter 14 today, verses 22 through 36. And today, the message is that God never wastes a storm. God never wastes a storm. Anything we go through in life has a purpose, has a plan, has a promise. And today, I hope you'll be encouraged and edified as we learn a familiar passage that I know many of you have heard before if you've been in church for any length of time. But before we start, let me just lead us in a moment of prayer, and then I'll have you be seated and we'll begin. Lord, I am so thankful for a time to worship and come together. God, you've been so good. God, I thank you for this church, and I thank you for your people who are so encouraging to me. And God, I just pray that in this time together, Lord, that we would be blessed, that we would learn more about you, Lord, that we would be challenged. And Lord, I just pray for myself, Lord. Lord, I don't want to get in the way of anything you want to say today, and I just pray that you would use me as your willing vessel to pour into, and Lord, that you would pour me out. And Lord, I just thank you for all that you do. In Jesus' name we pray, amen and amen. You may be seated. I just want to take a moment before we get really going. I just want to brag on this church. Yesterday, we probably had, I don't know, we didn't get a head count, but I would say anywhere 45 to 50 people show up. And we did some work around this place yesterday. My goodness, we got some stuff done. And it was so cool because I got here early because I brought some biscuits for everybody. So I was getting everything set up, getting ice on the drinks and everything else because I knew it was going to be a hot day. And it was like a redneck parade coming down Highway 69. Here comes a dump trailer. Here comes a tractor. Here comes another tractor. Here comes a mini excavator. I mean, I was like, this is amazing. And then, man, people just showed up, and we got so much. Then we put out 60-something bags of mulch, and we got up on the roof of the mod and tried to fix it. I think it's just held together, just termites holding hands right now. But we're trying to make sure that it stays up as long as it can. We put out 2 loads of topsoil around the basketball court so nobody can break an ankle anymore. Then we dug a 200-foot trench to hard pipe the baptistry line to go out so it could drain better. And we built a shed. We have a 7x7 shed that was built yesterday. Then we had to move it like a bunch of Amish people, pick it up and carry it across the back and drop it. And we cleaned out that room back there because I told you we got babies coming. And we needed some more space. And we was able to empty out an entire room and get cribs built and baby bounce seats and everything put into that room. And now we have another nursery back there. I mean, I'm telling you, we did some work yesterday. So I just want to just thank you. Can we just give some love to the people that came out yesterday? I mean, they sweated, only a few cuss words, and I'm just so thankful. We're in a process of sanctification around here. And then Wednesday night, if you miss Wednesday, again, it's because you don't love Jesus. And but Wednesday night, we had a great time too. We had an ice cream social, and people brought some homemade ice cream. Who brought the strawberry ice cream? Anybody? Who brought the strawberry ice cream? That was made by angels, I think, because nobody's claiming it. But all the ice cream is good, but I'm a fan of homemade strawberry ice cream. And I listen, we had all these different varieties back there, and we just had a great time of hanging out and just stuffing our faces with all kinds of awesome treats. So I'm just blessed to be your pastor. I really am. I'm so thankful for you and your heart and all that you do. It's encouraging. This is our going in our fifth month of being here, and God is just really showing up and showing out, and I'm just so thankful for all that you do. So jumping back into Matthew chapter 14, verse 22 through 36, this is what it says. And straightway Jesus constrained. That's an important word there that we'll unpack later. So if you like to underline and circle and highlight, that's a good word to do that with. Jesus constrained his disciples to get into a ship and to go before him unto the other side while he sent the multitudes away. And when he had sent the multitudes away, he went up into a mountain apart to pray. When the evening was come, he was there alone. But the ship was now in the middle of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. That's another good word. And in the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went unto them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, It is a spirit. Somebody said, I've never believed in ghosts until I saw one for myself. This is a moment they don't know what they're looking at. They just see something that looks impossible. And they see this figure coming on the waves, and they said, it must be a ghost. And it says they think it's a spirit. He walked on and it says this, it says, and they cried out for fear, verse 27, but straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. And Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. And he said, come. And when Peter was come down out of the ship, he walked on the water to go to Jesus. But when he saw the wind was boisterous, he was afraid and began to sink. He cried, saying, Lord, save me. And immediately Jesus stretched forth his hand and caught him and said unto him, O thou little faith, wherefore didst thou doubt? And when they were come into the ship, the wind ceased. Then they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, of a truth thou art the Son of God. And when they were gone over, they came into the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place had knowledge of him, they sent out into all the country round about, and brought unto him all that were diseased, and besought him that they might only touch the hem of his garment. And as many as touched were made perfectly whole. This is a story about storms. A story about storms. My daughter, she has grown out of this phase, but for years when she was younger, she would check the weather app every single night. Every single night, she would get my wife's phone and she would check the weather because she wanted to know if it was going to rain or storm that evening while she was in bed. And if it was going to show any indication that it was going to rain at all, she was going to try to convince us that she should be able to sleep downstairs in the living room because she didn't want to be upstairs. And she did this for years, and they tell you when a bad storm, when a threat of severe weather or a tornado comes to get into the most centralized part of your house, because we don't have a basement, and we don't have a storm shelter, and so they say get in the most centralized part of your house. And the most centralized part of our house without any windows is a bathroom that's under the stairs. We call it Harry Pooper. It's like Harry Potter, the boy under the stairs, is the bathroom under the stairs. I know that's crude, but we think it's funny. And so... we have this bathroom under the stairs, and that's where the centralized part of our home is. And what she would do if a bad storm was coming, she would just call dibs and go in there by herself and take up the whole space. And then we were like left to fend for ourselves. And I guess in her mind, somebody has to live to tell the story. And so she just takes this bath. But she did that for years. She would take this downstairs. She was scared of storms. And some of us are still kind of scared of storms or traumatized by storms. But storms in Scripture always have a purpose, and it's applicable to the things we go through in life. Now, to kind of give some context about what's happening, just moments before this incident with them on the waves being tossed to and fro, they were serving 5,000 men, not counting women and children, a miraculous meal. If you remember, they bring a little boy's little lunchbox, and they distribute it amongst what some believe anywhere from 10 to 15,000 people. This miraculous miracle was multiplied so that everybody had enough and then some to eat, that there were enough left over to collect 12 baskets worth. And they just got to see this with their own eyes. And it's immediately after this moment that Jesus says, get in the boat. Get in the boat. Now, I want you to write this down. If you have your outline, I want you to write number one, that this storm was directed by God. It was directed by God. Again, the disciples had just finished ministering to 5,000, 12,000, 15,000 people, and they were in the perfect will of God. They were doing exactly what God has wanted them to do. They're serving and ministering. They're hand in hand with Jesus doing this, and then Jesus tells them to get into the boat. He says he constrains them. That means forces them, which means they were kind of arguing with him. They didn't want to get in the boat, and he makes them get in the boat anyways. He's putting them out to sea. Now, let's take in consideration that a third of the disciples are professional fishermen. They're familiar with the water. They're familiar with the tides. Here's my theory, because I can't prove it, but it's my opinion. I wonder if the reason why they didn't want to get in a boat is because they knew something was about to happen. You know, you can feel it in the air sometimes when a storm is coming. Some of y'all is like, my arthritis is acting up. I know a storm's coming. My knee hurts. My storm is coming. Well, these fishermen, no doubt, could feel the change in the environment, and they could feel sometimes there's a coldness that happens right before a storm hits, and maybe you can even smell it. Sometimes you can smell the rain coming, And they didn't want to go, and Jesus makes them get into the boat. And one of the things I want us to understand is that just because you go through a storm in life doesn't mean that God is angry with you or God is trying to discipline you. Sometimes the storm is the exact perfect thing that God is sending you into because he's trying to teach you something from it. There are some benefits of going through hardships in our life, because if all that we ever experience in life are the good things, then we would never appreciate how God can be faithful in the hard things. If all you want to do is be on the shallow side, if you want to be on the shore, if you want to have just perfect peace, then you'll have a shallow faith. And you'll have a shallow dependence on God. And you'll have a shallow hope in him. But when God calls you out into the deep waters, then all of a sudden you have a deeper faith, and you have a deeper hope, and you have a deeper understanding, and you have a deeper dependence on him. And so I just want you to understand that God will allow you to go through things, not because he's hateful, but because he loves you and he's preparing you for something. Growing up, I had a difficult home life growing up. My parents divorced when I was 3. It's not uncommon. People get divorced. I think statistically it's sitting around 50% of all marriages end in divorce. So it's not an unusual thing. My parents both got married again when I was about 3 or 4 years old. And so I had step-parents. And both sets of step-parents, my stepmom and my stepdad, had kids from a previous marriage. And then my mom and my stepdad have a kid together. Then my dad and my stepmom have a kid together. And I'll be honest, growing up, I kind of felt misplaced. I didn't know where I belonged because I felt like there was an established family unit over here, and it felt like there was an established family unit over here, and I was just the odd man out. And I struggled with that for a lot of years. Mentally, as a kid, that's hard to reconcile, not feeling like you have a place. And I let thoughts begin to build. And it turned into a lot of bad decisions. I began to self-medicate a lot of things that I was trying to numb, the thoughts and things I tried to push down. And so by the age of 14, I was drinking already heavily on a regular basis. And then I started dabbling into drugs and other things. And by the age of 15, I began to believe this lie that a lot of people believe, which is that it's never going to get better. It's always going to be this way. My tomorrows will be just like my todays. And all of a sudden, the light at the end of the tunnel doesn't exist anymore, and you begin to get convinced that it's a pretty good option to just go ahead and end it now. So at 15 years old, I tried to overdose and take my own life. And thank the Lord, it didn't succeed. But that was a lot of things I was battling with in that moment that was just heavy. At the age of 17, I moved to Panama City, Florida to move in with my dad, and I thought I was hitting the reset button on life and I'd be able to start over, and I started making bad decisions all over again, and I was still battling a lot of things that I just wouldn't give over to the Lord because I wasn't saved yet. But my dad made me go to church, and at the age of 17, I gave my life to Jesus, and everything switched around. Now, I look back on my life, and I look back on that childhood and the pain and the trauma and the bad decisions and all the struggles that I went through as a kid. And I asked the Lord, what was that about? I wasn't a bad kid. Why did I deserve this? I don't even understand why I went through the things I went through. But then after spending 20 years in youth ministry, what I realized is that God gave me some pain to go through that I can use as a platform in order to reach these kids that are going through some of the same things. Do you realize the most powerful words you can say in the English language are the words "me too"? When you encounter somebody who's going through a familiar struggle that you just came through yourself, all of a sudden there is a bridge and a connection that is built from their heart to yours because you have something to offer them. Because they're going through it, they're not going to listen to somebody who ain't never been down that road before. But they'll listen to you if you have a similar story. And I look at that and I realize that God allowed me to go into a storm for a purpose because he was going to use it in a greater way. Now, my wife's story is a lot different. She grew up, I would say, in a perfect Hallmark family. She had a pastor daddy and a praying mama. Both her siblings are in ministry today. When we started dating, I couldn't call the house at 8 o'clock because every night at 8 o'clock they would have Bible study together. And I knew if I called at 8 o'clock that they were going to answer the phone. And she would hear me share my testimony, and sometimes she felt a little discouraged because she felt like she didn't have that exciting of a story to tell. And she's like, I got saved when I was 4 years old. She'll tell you about it. She said, it became real to me at 4 years old that I was lost. And she's been living for the Lord ever since. Her story is a lot different than mine. She feels disappointed because she don't have an exciting story. Yet I look at her story and like, man, I wish I had that story. Because my story is, man, look what God saved me from, and her story is, look what God kept me from. It's still a powerful story either way. And so maybe you haven't been through a lot of things in life, but I want to guarantee you have something you've been through that God wants to use. He's allowed you to go through some hardships in life, even when you didn't really want to, because there's a benefit on the other side. He's elevated your struggle so that it can give him glory. Now, we're going to unpack this a little bit more. Number 2, I want you to write this down. The storm develops his disciples. The storm develops his disciples. Verses 24 and 25. It says, but the ship was now in the midst of the sea, tossed with waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the 4th watch of the night, Jesus went unto them walking on the sea. It says the wind was contrary. That word just means opposite. It was blowing against them. They were struggling against the wind. Jesus gave them a command, get in a boat, go to the other side. Yet the wind was blowing against them. Can I just say, being in the will of God is not always easy. They were doing exactly what the Lord told them to do, but yet it was still a struggle. Being in the perfect will of God does not guarantee that you will be absent from struggles. It does not guarantee that you'll have nothing but easy sailing. Sometimes it's the quite opposite. Sometimes being in the perfect will of God will be some of the hardest places to be. And there are times where God will allow us to go into these places and these situations. But can I just tell you this? God will never allow his children to suffer without a reason. Anything that has ever touched your life had to first come through his hands. And this is important because nothing has taken him by surprise, even if it took you by surprise. He is in control. We sang about that this morning. He is in control. Every heartbreak, every tear, every fight, every failed relationship, every trauma, every hurt, every moment in your life is an opportunity that you would be developed in a way that you could not be developed any other means. These struggles and hardships build you and build character in a way that nothing else can. Here's what I believe. I believe that pain should pay you. Pain should pay you. It should pay you knowledge. It should pay you wisdom. It should teach you something. See, pain is a classroom. Pain is a classroom, and you learn some things through hardships and trials that you would not learn from anywhere else. Some people, instead of treating pain like a classroom, though, they treat pain like a coffin. And they just get buried there. They just die there. They never learn the lesson, and so they just bury themselves wherever their struggle is. But I want you to know that some of you right now, you're still buried in a past mistake. You blew up a marriage, you blew up a relationship, you blew up an opportunity, you blew up a business, and you're still buried in that moment. And you're condemning yourself so badly that you just become stuck there, and you don't know how to get out. When I think about Jesus was in the Garden of Gethsemane right before his betrayal and arrest and his crucifixion. And while he's in the Garden of Gethsemane, the word Gethsemane is an Aramaic word that means olive press. And the way an olive press works is you take olives and you put them on this kind of hollowed out stone, and then you roll a larger stone on top of the olives, and it would squeeze and crush the olives, releasing the inner value of the olive, which is the oil. And it was a crushing that had to happen in order to release what was inside of that olive. Jesus is in the middle of the Garden of Gethsemane, and he is literally being crushed by the weight of what's about to happen. He's talking to the Father. He says, Lord, if it be possible, let this cup pass before me. But not my will, but thy will be done. What is he talking about when he says the cup? The cup is the wrath of God, the unfiltered judgment and wrath of God upon sin. Jesus is not worried about the Roman guards. Jesus ain't worried about crucifixion. What he's stressing about is that he is about to become the representative for all of humanity's sin. He who knew no sin is going to become sin on our behalf. And the weight of that is crushing him to the point that the scripture says in Luke's gospel that he sweats great drops of blood. This is a rare medical episode called hematidrosis, where the capillaries in the face begin to burst. And then the sweat and the blood mix together, and it looks as if he's sweating blood there in the garden. He is being crushed. Isaiah chapter 53, verse 10. It says, "It pleased the Lord to bruise him." That word bruise also means crush. He hath put him to grief when thou shalt make his soul an offering for sin. He is literally being crushed in the garden, drops of blood falling from his face. And the crushing that took place in the life of our Savior was in order to release the salvation upon the souls of men. See, here's what I've learned is that powerful things come from the other side of crushing. Some people want power, but they don't want to be crushed. They want wisdom, but they don't want to be crushed. They want a platform, but they don't want to be crushed. But what comes on the other side of crushing is greater character and greater wisdom and greater strength and greater understanding. Sometimes you have to go through the crushing first. And that's why pain should pay you. Pain should pay you. If you go through hard seasons, it should pay you. If you never go through a storm or trial or hardship and you don't learn something, if you go through those things, you don't learn something, then you failed. Don't give up on the storm. Don't get discouraged in the middle of the crushing, because on the other side, there is going to be something greater that happens. In Philippians chapter 1, verse 9, it says, "For unto you it is given," or granted, "in the behalf of Christ, not only to believe on him, but also to suffer for his sake." He says that you will be given things by the Lord to not only be blessed, but to suffer. God gives us things that we'll suffer through. And that seems so discouraging. And so how does God love us and let us go through something like this? Again, because he has something better for you on the other side. There is something greater. Pain and trials, can we just be honest? Pain and trials are inevitable. They're going to happen. There's going to be things that come out of nowhere. And how you respond to those moments will determine your character. You can either let it become a coffin or you can let it become a classroom. If I'm going to go through something in life that's going to keep me up at night, if I'm going to go through something in life that makes me cry, if I'm going to go through something that stresses me out, if I'm going to go through something that's going to worry me to death, then I'm going to make it pay me. I'm going to learn something from it. I heard one pastor say, he said, "You're a fool if you go through some kind of pain and not come out with some kind of payment." I think of men like this guy named Dave Rover. Dave Rover was a man who fought in Vietnam, and in 1969, he had a phosphorus grenade blow up on him. And it completely marred and scarred his body from head to toe. He was completely damaged by this phosphorus grenade. He could have used that as a coffin to be discouraged, to never want to do anything for the Lord ever again. But instead, he uses it as a classroom. And what he does in response to this is he goes to the VAW hospitals, and he goes and meets with wounded soldiers. And all these soldiers who would usually kick preachers out of the room, for some reason, when this burned man, this soldier walks into the room completely disfigured from that phosphorus grenade, when he walks in the room, all of a sudden they kind of perk up and want to hear what he has to say. Because in their mind, he gets it. He understands. He has that Me Too story. And he was able to lead thousands of wounded soldiers to Christ because of what he went through. He used his pain as a classroom and a platform to lead others to the Lord. I think of a man like Andrew Winfrey. Some of y'all might know Andrew Winfrey. I promise, an athlete. He was going to Coleman High School. He was he played 3 sports: basketball, baseball, and football. He started on varsity his freshman year in all 3 sports. Already had D1 schools looking at him, wanting to offer him scholarships to go play for him. And then Andrew Winfrey was in a single-car accident where he ended up suffering a traumatic brain injury. He actually died multiple times as they were trying to save his life, and he would die and come back to life and die and come back to life. And he could have used that as a coffin. He could have been defeated and been angry at God, but instead he used it as a classroom. And he used his platform with a traumatic brain injury. He'll never be the same again. He can barely walk straight. He can barely keep himself balanced. But he'll go to schools and he'll go to churches and he'll go to youth events and he'll share his testimony. And hundreds of people have come to Christ because of what he has to say. I think of people like Wendy Smithson. Some of y'all might know Miss Wendy. The same year that Tracy was diagnosed with cancer, I think shortly after that, her son was diagnosed with the same type of cancer. And now while her son is battling cancer, she finds out that her husband's cancer has come back. And so she's got her son at Birmingham. She's got her husband up in Vanderbilt. And then here recently, she found out that now she has cancer. And you have this woman who could have used this as a coffin to just lay down and die and say, "You know what, I'm done." But now she's being invited to go to all these churches and all these events to share about the goodness of God. What am I trying to say? I'm trying to tell you that God will allow you to go through hardships, not to condemn you, not to defeat you, but to encourage you and to deepen you. Because he has something he wants you to learn so that it can bless others. And some of you might be thinking, well, my life is pretty good right now. I haven't had any tragedy. I'm pretty blessed. I just want you to know that don't disqualify you from being used by God either. You might be like Tracy, who has that testimony where you didn't have any trials and struggles growing up, and you had a pretty good life, and you had a mama and daddy loved each other, and that's great. You still have a Me Too story to tell somebody. You have an ability to reach people that I could never reach. You have a circle of influence that I'll never be able to infiltrate. You have connections and friends and coworkers that I'll never be able to come in contact with. You have something to share with them. In Matthew chapter 14, verse 25, getting back to our story, here they are in the middle of the storm that Jesus allowed them to go into, told them, get them in the boat. In Matthew 14, 25, it says, in the fourth watch of the night, Jesus went unto them, walking on the sea. Let's do some calculations. They had been feeding people all day long. I would estimate that it's probably about 7 p.m. about now when they get into the boat or they're having this conversation. About 8 p.m., they're out in the boat. They're rowing out in the storm. And it says that they get into the middle of the sea. Now, the Sea of Galilee is only 8 miles across. If they were rowing in favorable conditions, it should take them only about 4 hours at most to get from one side to the other. But it says in the fourth watch of the night, they're in the middle of the sea. So we can guess that it's probably been about 7 hours now that they've been rowing, and they've only gotten to the middle. The fourth watch of the night is between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. This is one of the darkest times of the whole day. They're out there, and they have been rowing and rowing and rowing, and they ain't got nowhere but halfway across. And the storm is beginning to wear on them. Physically, they're exhausted. They've been fighting the storm for hours. Their prayers, I'm sure, were exhausted because you know your prayer life kicks up in hard times. I remember I was hunting one time. This has been years ago, and I got lost for 9 hours in the woods in the middle of the rain, and it was cold. And I had just recently been married. I'm talking about recently gotten married. And I thought, man, if I die in here, she's going to kill me. I'm like, I got to make it out. And I'm telling you, for 9 hours, my prayer life kicked up. I'm praying out loud, Lord of heaven and all creation, that you would make a way in the wilderness for me to come out of this place. You know, I'm singing old hymns, the first, second, and the third verse. I'm singing them all. And I'm just walking through the woods, and I'm testifying. I'm repeating every verse that I know by memory. Your prayer life kicks up when things get hard, don't it? And so no doubt these disciples were praying. They're just rowing. They're physically exhausted. Their prayers are exhausted. Their expectations are exhausted. Certainly they had expected that there had been some kind of response from God by now. Their hope is exhausted. If Jesus was coming, certainly he would have been coming by now. Their faith was exhausted because when Christ finally did appear, they didn't even think it was him. They thought it was a ghost. There's an important message for us here. Because it says Jesus came in the fourth watch. You know what the fourth watch represents? It represents the end of your rope. It represents when all hope is gone. It represents when you've tried everything. It represents when you've done everything and you feel like nothing is going to change. You can often expect Jesus to come to your rescue when everything you've tried has failed. And you might be thinking, well, that doesn't seem fair. Why would God wait until I've tried everything? Because he doesn't want you to get any of the credit. If he came at the beginning of your trial, then you would think it was something you did. If he came at the beginning of your storm, you would have thought it was because of your resources and your connections that you got through. But when you've done it all and then he comes and he rescues you, then he gets all the credit. You know what Isaiah chapter 42 verse 8 says? He says this, I am the Lord, that is my name, and my glory will I not give to a... He says, I will share my love with you, my peace with you, my grace with you, my mercy with you, but I ain't sharing my glory with nobody. And the reason he comes to the fourth watch is because he wants to get all the glory. Number 3, I want you to see the storm discovered Peter's weakness. The storm discovered Peter's weakness. Verse 26 and 28. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were troubled, saying, it is a spirit. And they cried out for fear, but straightway Jesus spake unto them, saying, Be of good cheer, it is I, be not afraid. Peter answered him and said, Lord, if it be thou, bid me come unto thee on the water. Now, again, they think it's a ghost, and Jesus replies and says, Don't be afraid, it's me. And Peter, I love Peter, because Peter just says things sometimes without thinking. That's how I like to have conversations sometimes. I just like to have conversations and not know where it's going. It surprised both of us. Like we both just figure it out as it happens, And that's how Peter is a lot of times. He just starts talking and saying things that you're like, why did you even say that, Peter? And says, Jesus, if that is you, let me come on the water with you. And Jesus says, come. And Peter gets out of the boat in the middle of the storm and begins to walk on water. Now, this guy deserves a lot of credit. I know we focus a lot on him sinking in the water, but he's the only joker that got out of the boat. I mean, he deserves a lot of credit here. He leaves the tried and the tested to go unto the untried and the unknown. This is significant. The disciples are still in a boat. Now, I've been in storms before on a boat. And I can tell you, from my personal experience, I'd rather be in the boat in the storm than in the water in the storm. Years ago, I had a friend, still a friend of mine to this day, but we used to carpool together. There's 4 of us that would carpool because we lived in Panama City, and our college was in Graceville, which is an hour and 15 minutes away. And so we're poor college kids. And so every week we'd swap who was driving. And one of the guys that would drive us, his name was Dave Daly. And he was the oldest of us out of the group. We were all in our early 20s. He was probably about 38 or 40. So he was the old man of the bunch. Dave came from Philly. He was different. He was a good dude. He was just a little different. He was probably about 6'3", every bit of probably 360 pounds, just a mountain of a man. And he was funny. And he had done drugs back in the day. So he's a little weird, but I love Dave. Dave loved to fish. I love to fish. Both of us poor kids. Poor man, poor kid. And we didn't have a boat, so we go wade fishing a lot. And wade fishing, you get about belly button deep or so, and you just go fishing out in the water. Now, we lived in the Gulf, so we fished salt water. And we had some honey holes. Boy, we catch some big ones. The biggest fish I ever caught was with Dave. I caught a 120-pound tarpon fishing off of Crooked Island Beach with Dave one time. It was amazing. But I would call him, his nickname was Danger Dave. Because every time we went somewhere together, weird stuff would happen. It would follow Dave everywhere we went. Just the craziest scenarios would happen. And so we was going to fish this tournament one day. And we had our place picked out. We didn't have a boat. We was going to go wade fishing, but we had some honey holes, and we were confident we could probably beat these people just by even wade fishing, even with them in a boat. And Dave called me the night before. He says, hey, I got a boat. I said, bro, you got a boat? He said, yeah, I got a boat. He said, meet me tomorrow morning at Beach Avenue, and we'll launch it, and we'll go fishing. I said, okay, deal. And that night, I didn't even think about it until the next morning when I realized where Beach Avenue is, there is no boat launch. And so I'm trying to figure out how we're going to launch this boat with no boat launch. And I pulled up in our spot we're supposed to meet, and there's Dave. He has his old white stranger danger van. And at the back end of his van is hanging out about 4 foot a John boat. And I got a picture of it. I said, Dave, send me a picture of that boat. That's that boat. Now, Dave, again, is about 6'3", 230 pounds. I'm a big guy. And this thing, it looks like a kid's toy. And we just pick it up, and we carry it across the street and drop it in the water. He says, I got a trolling motor. I said, okay. And he pulls out the back of the van the oldest trolling motor I've ever seen in my life. It looked like the prototype of a trolling motor. The head on it was about this big, full metal. It was metal. And the propeller on it was about that big. It was the wonkiest looking motor I've ever seen in my life. And he carries it, and we get a battery, put it in there, and we go out, and we shove off. And we get out there, and we start fishing. And it's not really a rough day, but when you're in that thing, it felt like we was in the eye of a hurricane. I mean, it was just tossing us like this. We sank that boat so low in the water that while we're sitting in it, I could reach over the edge and play in the water like this right here. I mean... We were barely floating already. I'm just over there just playing in the water. I said, Dave, are we going to be okay? He said, we're going to be okay. And the waves are just going like this, coming over the side, coming over the front. I said, Dave, are we okay? He said, we're okay. And then a few seconds later, I hear a noise. I was like, what? So I turn around. Dave had cut a 2-liter bottle in half, and he's bailing water out of the boat as fast as he can because we're taking on water. And I said, Dave, are we okay? He said, we're okay. And about that time, another wave come over the side of the boat, and we sunk straight down. We'd only made it about 50 yards offshore, so we just stand up. We're like, we literally, this is where we would have started without the boat, And so we had to drag this thing back all the way up to the beach. He gets electrocuted by this Thomas Edison trolling motor. He's trying to disengage it from the battery. It's shocking him. I've learned that in the middle of scenarios and situations, it's a lot easier to be in the boat than out of the boat. And here's Peter saying, Lord, if it's you, I want to be out of the boat with you. I want to come where you are. And here he is out there on the middle of this storm doing the impossible. And he begins to lose focus. We begin to lose focus. And his weakness is exposed. It says this, that the wind became boisterous and he was afraid and began to sink. And I used to think about this. Why did Peter sink? Why did he sink? Is it because he took his eyes off of Jesus? Is it because of the storm? Why did he begin to sink? And for years, I kind of began to question everything I was taught about this because I was always taught that he began to doubt Jesus. But let me ask you, is Jesus sinking? He ain't sinking. If I'm following Jesus and I'm walking out to him and I begin to see him sink, then I'll begin to doubt and I lose faith in him, but he ain't sinking. So in a situation, as he's walking, he begins to sink because he loses faith. Who is he doubting? And here's what I believe. I believe he's doubting himself. I can't be doing this. I can't make it through this. This is impossible. How can this happen? Here's what I've learned is that many times when the things you see with your physical eyes become bigger than the things that you see with your spiritual eyes is the moment you begin to sink. When the things that the Lord tells you doesn't match the things that you have seen, you begin to doubt. I've shared this before when Tracy was going through her battle. I had a moment where I was talking to the Lord, and I believe with all my heart that God said, Andrew, she's going to be okay. I believe that with all my heart. He told me that. But then I get to the hospital, and I see all of her hair is gone. And I see her sicker than she's ever been. She can't even get out of bed, and she's barely hanging on. And yet, what I see with my eyes doesn't match what God told me with His Spirit. And now the things are conflicting, and what I'm seeing doesn't match what I heard, and what I'm seeing doesn't match what I believe, and I begin to sink. I believe this was happening in Peter. Peter knows God said, come to me. He's walking out there. He knows what he can do through Jesus, but then he begins to see with his physical eyes something that looks contrary than what he's been told, and he begins to doubt that this could be possible. See, Peter's weakness was doubt, and that was only exposed to the storm. See, storms will expose things in you. Storms will reveal things about you that you wouldn't have revealed any other way. Jesus was going to use Peter in a significant way. He called him rock or Cephas. He was going to be a stone. He was going to be somebody he was going to use to build the early church. And so he needed Peter to be ready to do things that seemed impossible. And that's why he let him to go through this storm that we're reading about today. Number 4, the storm deepened their worship. The storm deepened their worship. Look in verse 33. Then they that were in the ship came and worshipped him, saying, of a truth thou art the Son of God. It says they that were in the ship. Who are they? Well, they are the 12 disciples. They all worship. See, they didn't get in the boat and say, Jesus, just give us a moment. Let's console Peter real quick. Peter, you okay, buddy? You sank really fast. That was scary. Are you okay, buddy? No, they didn't get no time out. They just began immediately to worship. See, when storms break and get into your life, what I've learned is that when Jesus gets onto your boat in the middle of the storm, you worship a little differently. You worship with a little bit more diligence and intentionality. This is why we should never criticize anyone else's worship, because you have no idea the storms that they've been through. You have no idea the things that they've come through. See, you worship differently when you've been through some things. You worship differently when you should have been dead, but God has given you the grace to live for another day. You worship differently. You worship differently when you were an addict, but now you're sober 3 years. All of a sudden, you worship a little differently. You worship differently when you were sitting at a table with divorce papers drawn up, ready to write your marriage off for life, but now here you are sitting in church together, holding hands with a stronger relationship than ever before. You worship a little differently. You worship differently when you've been trying to have kids and you have been unable to, but then God gives you a heart to foster and to adopt, and then you come to church with that new little baby that you've been able to take into your care. You just worship a little differently. When Jesus gets on the boat in the middle of the storm into your life, the way you worship is a lot different than the way you worshiped before. There was no pause. There was no timeout. Peter is soaking wet, and he's worshiping. Number 5, I want you to see the storm didn't disqualify Peter. The storm didn't disqualify him. Verse 34 and 36. And when they were gone over, they came into the land of Gennesaret. And when the men of that place had knowledge of him, they sent out unto the country round about and brought unto him all that were diseased and besought him that they might only touch the hem of his garment. And as many as were touched were made perfectly whole. I kind of alluded to it already, but something that Scripture doesn't tell us, but I believe to be absolutely true, because it's logical. If Peter sank, Peter is wet. He is dripping wet. He's in the middle of the boat, dripping wet from the storm, from the failure. But do you know what I've learned? I learned the most powerful time that you can come to worship the Lord is not when you dry off, but when you're still wet. The most powerful time that you can sing praises to Him and sing to Him is not when you get your life together, but still in the middle of when your life is coming apart. Immediately after this crazy experience, as Peter is sunk into the water, he gets onto the boat, he begins to worship him, soaking wet, and it says in verse 34 and 35 that they get to the other side where they were going, and they begin to minister to people. They begin to bring people that were diseased and sick to Jesus, and I'm thinking about this. There's the 11 or 12 disciples, and there's Jesus, and the only one that's there dripping is Peter. The only one that's still wet is Peter. And I love this because in churches today, we've been told our whole life that we have to dry off before we're of any use. You can't come to church wet. You need to dry off first. You can't be seen wet or damp or dripping. We'll throw a couple towels your way to cover up your failure. We don't do wet people around here. We don't do damp people around here. We don't do dripping people around here. All of us are dry. And you have to be dry too. Here's Peter not having a moment of failure not long ago, and yet he's standing next to Jesus and he's ministering. I understand that there are certain moral and ethical failures that can limit a person's opportunities to serving in a church, but I just want you to know that you're all welcome at the table in some capacity, whether you're dripping or not. And we want people to believe that somehow we have to have it all together in order to be of any use or any significance. You know, one of the things I've learned in churches is that churches are really good at hiding, or people in churches are really good at hiding, really good at pretending. See, we think that holiness and righteousness in our lives is not by how little we sin, but how much we can convince others how little we sin. And the longer you're saved, what you end up doing is you trade sins that are harder to hide for sins that are easier to hide. And you might be thinking, well, I hadn't gotten drunk and I ain't smoked dope in years. Yeah, but let me see that search history. You know, I don't party like I used to. Well, how are you treating your wife? I mean, I don't go crazy like I used to, man. You ought to see me before. I'm a different man. Yeah? How you act at the hunting club with the boys? Man, you trifling. You stepping in my garage. What are you doing? I just want us to understand that in this room is people that we all have sin and shame and mistakes that we want to keep hidden from other people. And one of the biggest mistakes that we make is that we assume that other people have to be dry because we want to put off the image that we too are dry. But no, listen, we've all failed. We've all sank. We've all been wet before. We all have our failures. We all have our issues. Peter failed in front of not just his friends. He failed in front of Jesus. He literally sank right in front of them. See, I want us to understand that the greatest thing that could happen to us is that if our deepest, darkest, most embarrassing sin would be broadcasted on the 5 o'clock news. Like, why? So that you don't have to keep pretending anymore. So you can be exposed for who you really are, so you can put it on Front Street and actually move past it and quit trying to stuff it down and hide it. Because some of us are so good at playing this spiritual hiding game that we don't want people to see that we're wet, and so we just try to dry off real quick. No. What I love about this is that even while Peter is sinking, Jesus' hand is on him. Do you know you can be failing and still have God's hand on you at the same time? He's rescued him out of his failure, rescued him out of his mistake. We need to believe the gospel. What Proverbs chapter 24, verse 16 tells us is that a just man falleth 7 times and rises up again. What I want to encourage you to do today is that sometimes you just have to get up and worship wet. And sometimes you just have to get up and work wet. And sometimes you just need to get up and witness wet. Sometimes you just have to lead your family wet. But many times we just want to sit down and dry off and sulk a little bit. Here he gets on the other side. He says, come on, Peter, we got work to do. I can imagine Peter, I'm still wet. So, come on. There's people here that need to know me. There's people here that need to come close to me. I need your help, Peter, come on. And too many times I've seen brothers and sisters who have stumbled in their walk with Jesus, and it's derailed their work and service for the Lord for years. And they wallow in self-pity, and they wallow in guilt and shame, and they just want to sit in the bottom of the boat and just hang out there for a little bit. And they get rocked and they get wrecked from the storms of life, and they're discouraged, and they just want to sit and sulk for a little bit. But Jesus is saying, come on, we got work to do. Your life is bigger than that moment. We got work to do. I wonder if there's any people in this morning that would say, I have been an unproductive and wet disciple for way too long. I want to start worshiping wet. I want to start witnessing wet. I want to start leading wet. I'm just ready to get out of this pit that I've put myself in. And some of you, I know, and you're in the middle of a storm right now. And you feel like those disciples. You feel like just doing everything you know to do. You're doing everything you know to do. You're giving it your all. Rowing as hard as you can, and you're getting nowhere. And you feel like those disciples. You've prayed, and you've cried, and you're exhausted. Can I just remind you today that just because Jesus seems distant doesn't mean that he's absent? That he comes close to you in moments like this, that he will come exactly at the 4th watch of the night. He'll come exactly right on time when you need him. Or some of you in this room, you have been crushed by life. You have just been absolutely crushed by unforeseen circumstances and moments and dilemmas in your life. And you've experienced loss, and you've experienced disappointment and betrayal, and you've experienced failure. And the enemy has convinced you, like he tried to convince me at 15 years old, that your life is over. You're never going to get through this. Can I just encourage you, don't let this storm become a coffin. Let it become a classroom. Don't die there, learn there. Be encouraged there, grow there. Or maybe you feel like Peter. You're sitting on the bottom of the boat, you're soaking wet. You know Jesus has rescued you, you know he has forgiven you, you know that he's helped you, but you ain't forgiven yourself yet. And you're waiting until you feel worthy enough again before you ever start serving again. Or you're waiting until you get it all together before you obey again. Can I just say that Jesus is not in love with some future better version of you? He's in love with you right now. Sometimes we think that I have to get everything right before I get right with him. No. He loves you as you are right now. He loves you too much to leave you as you are, but he loves you as you are right now. If Peter would have waited until he dried off before he started helping Jesus again, there would have been a lot of people that day on that seashore that never had an opportunity to get to Jesus because there would have been one less person helping that day. I wonder how many people we have restricted from coming to know Jesus because we have been so full of pity and remorse and regret because of our failure, and we're just like, I just need a little bit more time to dry off first. No. It's time to get up. It's time to get going. And so maybe the greatest step of faith that you can take today is that you get up and worship. And maybe the greatest step of faith you can take today is that you get up and you serve, and you get up and lead your family, and you get up and believe that God's grace is bigger than your failure. So that is the invitation today. I'm just going to invite you to stand. And I'm just going to invite you, man, I know this is a hard message. Here's what I've learned. Oh my gosh. There's so many times where we feel like we have a desire to come to the altar, a desire to lay it down, but then we also have the fear of what are people going to think of me when I come up here? Are they going to think I have a struggle? Are they going to think I'm battling some kind of sin? Are they going to think I have some kind of mistake I'm trying to get over? And we sit there and we get consumed with the thoughts of other people. Man, I don't care about them. I don't care what people think. First of all, if they're thinking that, then they need to get their life right. I heard a pastor say this one time. He said he preached on a message about marriage, knowing good and well that his marriage was in trouble. And he got up there and he was trying to encourage other church members about their marriage and how to lead well. And at the end of the message, he gave an altar call. He says, if you and your wife would like to come over and come up to the altar and pray together, would y'all do that? And he was broken inside because he knew that he needed to be down there with his wife praying over her because their marriage was on the rocks. And he said, I can't do it because I'm afraid of what they might think, that they might think that I don't have a perfect marriage. And so I just pretended that I had everything together. And that's the worst thing you can do, is pretend you have it all together. And so I'm just going to give a simple invitation. The invitation is this. If you just feel like you need to come down and just give it at the feet of Jesus, then you come. You come worship wet, you come pray wet, you come seek his face wet, you lead your family wet, whatever it is. But the storms of life are a classroom, not a coffin. So get up, believer. You're alive today. Give him praise.